What, you have a podcast?
Really?
Computer, show the historical documents.
It's
just time for a theocratic monarchy. King Trump, for life. Let's go.
I said, no, Sean, I'm going to be a dictator. I said that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Recovery from Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Frame, and today is Thursday, February 8th, 2024. This is actually the second taping of this, and I already deleted the wrong thing. Technical difficulties, let's just say. So if you see a little strangeness, please try to ignore it. Let's see here. First, I talked about Marianne Williamson. She has dropped out. She was one of the two people, along with Dean Phillips, running against President Biden in the Democratic primary. She has suspended her campaign, so she's out. I had nothing against her. You know, she seems like a nice lady who just wants to try to do the right thing. Unfortunately, that's not going to get you anywhere in today's modern politics. So, you know, goodbye to her. So now it's basically a two-man race, as strange as that is, for Dean Phillips versus Biden, which a friend of mine yesterday, Jay, he brought up a pretty interesting point that I think, you know, doesn't, you know, get mentioned a lot, is that Biden, the reason that Dean Phillips is gaining no traction has absolutely nothing to do with the voters or the media. It's all to do with the DNC. Right now, Biden is the perfect embodiment of the Democratic Party. You know, he's doing everything they want. If he wasn't, then you would see a very strong primary challenge. All of a sudden, Democrats would begin breaking rank and endorsing Dean Phillips or somebody else. You know, somebody else would have been promoted. But that simply hasn't been happening. So, you know, you have to understand that no matter what public polling shows, no matter what this direction is going, until you see a mass exodus of Democrats actually endorsing someone else, he's perfectly fine. He's going to be the nominee. It's just not even a question. The next big story of the day basically is going to be what we're talking about tomorrow. But today, as of right now, actually, the Supreme Court is, soon. The Supreme Court will be hearing arguments regarding the 14th Amendment and Donald Trump. In case you were unaware, both Colorado and Maine have decided that Donald Trump is guilty of insurrection and therefore doesn't qualify to hold office in the United States anymore. This was written after the Civil War because it became very apparent that once the South had rejoined the North, obviously they needed House of Representatives, they need senators, and these motherfuckers, these Confederate assholes, tried electing people who were like leading the secession back into Congress, and the Republicans of the day, being Lincoln's party, were like, "Yeah, no, that's absolutely not happening. No, we're not letting you treasonous bastards back in." So they created the 14th Amendment specifically to stop that from happening, because the last thing you want is a bunch of insurrectionists running your country. Yeah. Anyway, the 14th Amendment doesn't specifically specify the Civil War. It just says insurrection, right? Sedition kind of a deal, which are all things that Trump is guilty of. I don't care who you are. He's an insurrectionist. He wanted to do a coup. If it was up to him, he would still be president, and would have been by force and shenanigans, not by actually winning the election. Another thing, you know, the 14th Amendment doesn't specifically say that this person needs to be criminally indicted and prosecuted and then convicted in a court by a jury of his peers. Like, that's not in there. Because they didn't criminally go after any of the secessionists from the Civil War. They, you know, in a spirit of Reconstruction, they wanted to just let bygones be bygones. Okay, well, you can't have slaves now, but yeah, sure, come on back in. So there's no rule that says that he has to be done. And considering the fact that the founders knew how to write and knew that this was a thing, if they wanted a conviction to be a part of this clause, they would have added that. They would have said, a person who is guilty, who has been found guilty of insurrection or sedition or all that stuff. They didn't write that. So we have to understand that if they left it out, that means that they felt it's implied. You know, it's not something you have to prove in a court of law. So the Supreme Court's going to hear about that, and they're going to decide whether or not to do it. I think the media is probably giving this too much attention, because the likelihood of the Supreme Court doing this is slim to none. Okay, you already have two justices off the bat are going to go as hard right as humanly possible. And in that case, that's Thomas and Alito. Those two guys are automatically on Trump's side no matter what. So Thomas and Alito are obviously going to go. Then you only need 3 more, and you literally have 3 justices appointed by Trump himself: Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And the idea that all 3 of them are going to vote against their boss, I say 2 out of 3 are going to go along with Thomas and Alito. So that leaves Justice John Roberts, and he's probably sitting there. He wasn't there for 2000 Bush v. Gore, so he's probably like, I don't want that. I don't want that. And he will probably go along to get along and shut it all down. I just don't see it. These guys aren't going to boot him from it. I believe they're going to lean on that whole, well, he hasn't been indicted for that and he hasn't been convicted, so it's okay if he's on the ballot. You can't eliminate somebody from the ballot for a crime they technically didn't commit, even though that's not what's written. It would be fantastic, I think, if the Supreme Court saved us all the trouble of doing this. It might even lead to Biden dropping out of the race, because I think the only reason Biden's running for a second term, and this is just my opinion, is he's got it in his head that he's America's savior from Trump, and that if Trump weren't running, or if the Senate had done its job and impeached him that second time and eliminated him from the ballot, I don't think Biden would run again. I think he sees it as his personal mission to go after this guy. He's the kind of guy who wants to go beat up the bully and show the bully who's boss and save us all. He wants to be the hero. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I understand where he's coming from. And so I think if you remove Trump from the equation, especially this early on, maybe, or, I had this horrible analogy yesterday that I made. It was basically, at that age, once you start to push, you're going to crap. Okay, it's just a matter of time. Like, you can't stop it once the gears get working at that age. So it is possible that now that he's fully committed to it, he's going to run no matter who it is, even if it's Nikki Haley and she ends up beating him by 30 points because we're all stupid. And Nikki Haley's a trash candidate. I'm telling you, she is not a good one. Everyone keeps saying she's a good one and we should all back her because Trump's so worse. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Enablers are just as bad. Arr. So I'm not interested in that. I think it would be great if the Supreme Court did that, though. It would save us a lot of trouble. I do think there would be violence. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of these right-wing lunatics would go out and try to break shit. And it would be very flabbergasting to me to once again watch the police treat them with kid gloves and have to watch the FBI go clean up the piece and the messes that they made and arrest them one by one because that's how Merrick Garland likes to do things. But, at the end of the day, there's going to be violence, I think, no matter what happens. If he stays on the ballot and declares that he won, even if he didn't, there's going to be violence. I would not even be surprised if he won legitimately and the left has such a violent backlash to that they actually what? The Women's March after his inauguration last time clearly wasn't enough. I could see it. I'm still waiting for that line because America hasn't crossed it yet where the left is just like, yeah, no, that's enough for me. We gotta go take care of it. I'm still waiting for that moment. I think it's closer than people think. A lot of the focus is rightly on the right, but I do think the left is just as capable and is just really trying not to, but it might end up getting dragged into it. With that, let's move on to the main story. So the other day, Mark Thiessen, who's a righty, wrote in the Washington Post an op-ed, and basically he said that it's good that the Republicans rejected that horrible border deal that they themselves negotiated. It follows a lot of talking points. Basically, his first argument is that, well, the president won't enforce the laws anyway, so who cares? Which is basically what Speaker Johnson said 2 days ago during his press conference before he, kicked himself in the nuts several times. And his next argument is that, well, Biden's packed the courts with all these liberal justices and it's not fair. We won't get our way. Which is another, right-wing talking point that somehow every judge in this country is a lefty lunatic. But basically he's suggesting that if they pass this bill now and then hypothetically Trump or another Republican gets elected and they want to close the border like Biden says he wants to, that there's verbiage in the law that could be construed a certain way by a certain liberal judge to actually tell the president, ha, no, you have to keep the border open. Ha, open borders, yes. Yeah, whatever. So that's his argument, and so, you know, he doesn't care for it much, and he just wants a completely shut down, closed border. You know, I mentioned yesterday, you would lose $2 billion per day just in trade alone if you did that. So I don't think that's something he really thinks about. And then there was another piece in The Nation. I destroyed my notes, deleted them, so I don't have her name in front of me. I think it's her. I think her name's Gabby. But she was talking about how Biden is basically going about this border deal as if he were a Republican, and he's doing it and he's risking alienating his own base, which I believe is very true. A lot of Democrats don't like this border deal as it was written, and they really don't like that Biden was so eager to do this. This is another way, there were a few jokes before, the Democratic primary in 2020 that said, Biden shouldn't run as a Democrat. He's not one. He should run as a Republican against Trump, because at least then he's being truthful. And I agree. I don't think Biden's really a very good Democrat. I don't think he's not left of center. He's right of center. He's Bush all over again. Bush was not a hardcore righty. His party was, but he actually was not. I mean, for fuck's sake, he has come out in support of the Muslim community a hell of a lot more than Biden has recently. He tried to get a border deal done, and then the Republican Party, went against him on that. So, I always considered Cheney to be the far right winger, and the rest of his, cabinet was obviously filled with very, very strong right wingers. But Biden's not a Democrat, and he's who we got. I mean, whatever. But he is risking alienating a lot of people. This border deal isn't that great. Okay, one of the parts of the deal is that it funds for more detention centers, more to allow for more family separation, to allow for more kids in cages, which I'm vehemently against. And for me, I do kind of agree with him. I'm worried about what happens with the next president who's not Biden. Because while Biden isn't so keen on the whole family separation thing, we know who is. And he's been in office before, and he did it. And this would actually make it a lot easier for him to do that. And I'm not so... I don't believe in this, the liberals own the courts bullshit that Thiessen was writing about. Like, conservatives do, very clearly. And they're much better at court shopping than liberals do. So they would take it to the Texas courts, and they would get their way. I don't see it. I think it's a horrible idea. The only part of it, too, that is even remotely good, that is kind of throwing the left a bone, which also helps the right, is it fully funds the judiciary system there. It hires more judges, it hires more lawyers to help with that. And get the whole asylum process, sped up, which is a huge problem. There's this horrific yet also great piece by John Oliver. He did a thing on the border, and he was talking about how there are literal infants who don't have parents or family, right? They were handed off to a stranger. They crossed the border with it. The stranger's like, this baby is not mine. And you have a literal toddler in court before a judge, and they have a lawyer who's supposed to argue on their behalf that they should stay here and that they have no family or anything. They have no connection. They're just a baby that showed up on the border, or a baby that showed up on America's doorstep. What the hell do you do with that? And, the even sadder fact that there are not enough lawyers to do that job. There aren't enough judges to do that job. There's like 2 judges or some shit who deal with the infants who just arrive. What the hell are we supposed to do with them? This is a very serious problem and deserves our attention. And it deserves more funding than it currently gets. But, that's one of the things that this bill would have done, was actually fund some of that, which, of course, that needs to happen. the very idea that you need a court and an adjudication for, a 2 or 3 year old. Like, do they even know where the fuck they are? Like, seriously. They're probably terrified out of their mind. They don't know where their mother is. This is, I don't know. It's very inhumane to me. If you wanted to streamline that process, I think there should be a special carve out for like fucking toddlers and below, and be like, hey, they just showed up alone. Somebody down south handing them off to a stranger and be like, please get my baby to safety. And it's like, why are we even arguing what the fuck to do here? Like, isn't the right thing to do to take them in? I don't know. But the rest of the bill is very draconian. He wants to shut it down. He wants to, build more camps, all this stuff. And I'm just like, I don't. Biden's operating on this whole idea that he's going to win the election. That's another strange thing. Again, do I like this bill if my worst enemy had it? Okay, my worst enemy is Donald Trump. And if he had this bill, he would make things 10 times worse with it. It weaponizes a lot of what he wants. This bill is what they would write if Trump were in office and they needed to kind of work with Democrats a little bit because it wasn't as draconian as like their HR 2 plan. But it's pretty fucking close. So, I wouldn't want Trump to have these powers. I don't even really like Biden having these powers, considering what he's doing. It's a really frightening situation down there, and a lot of us don't want to give it too much attention. We like to vilify the other, and I don't agree with that either. I am a fan of open borders, in case anybody's looking, like in case, you hear that argument, oh, nobody serious is offering open borders. Hi, I am right here. I'm saying open borders. Fuck it. Like, I don't care. I see the border closure as merely a way to exploit human beings, right? Like, nobody wants to pay farm workers, the farm hands, a reasonable wage, so we bring in immigrants. That's really what it is. There's this myth that Americans don't want to do the job, and it's like, no, we do want to do the job. We don't want to do the job for no pay and no breaks. See, that's always the thing. If you go to any of these farmers, and there are a few farmers who will tell you the anecdotal story of the one time they hired, the local white boys from down the street, the teenagers. They're like, yeah, they work for about an hour and then they just quit. It was just insane. They don't want to work. But these immigrants, they're really nice because they come down here and they do all the work for us, and it's fantastic. And, what they don't mention is, it's not that the Americans don't want to do the job, it's that the Americans don't want to do the job for shit pay, and they don't want to, they want to take breaks. Like, that's something the immigrants don't get to do. They don't get to take breaks. They don't get to do anything. They have to work from sunup to sundown doing a job you couldn't do for more than 15 minutes in your own backyard with some weeds by hand picking. Okay? You wouldn't do that for more than 15 minutes without taking a break. Especially in the weather some of these guys got to do. Like, it's really fucking hot during the spring and summer sometimes, especially down here in the South. So the whole, concept of the border to me is just a means of controlling human beings. It has nothing to do with the welfare state, right? You always hear that from the right. The Republicans are always like, oh, these people, they get free money and they're going to take your tax dollars and do it. Like, trust me, Ted Cruz doesn't give two flying fucks about your tax dollars. It is not some sacred cow to them. They spend it on bullshit all the time. They don't care. And besides, even if we decided to feed and house all these people, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the billions of dollars we're sending to Ukraine and Israel to fight wars or help with the genocide. So it's really nothing. I mean, we could feed and house everyone in this country for pennies if we wanted to. We just don't want to because there's this weird Protestant, you gotta work for your living and make all your stuff yourself and nobody gets a free ride bullshit that everybody believes in. If we could get rid of that part of the culture, a lot of our problems would be solved instantaneously. So it isn't that. It's a load of crap. They just open and close the border depending on whether or not they need work. And right now they kind of do. That's the weird thing. Republicans are complaining about the border being open, but right now unemployment's very low. So of course the border's open. They need workers. They need workers because Americans aren't looking for work. That's the thing. We're happy right now. We're in our place. We're happy. And none of us are looking for farm work. So of course that's where it's going to be. And as far as I'm concerned, this is all just a way to exploit workers. It's a way not to pay us. It's a way not to pay them. It's a way to just make things cheaper. And, you know, they argue sometimes it's like, well, no American's going to pay $10 for a head of broccoli. You're right. We probably wouldn't. That's why there's this thing called subsidies. Like, we subsidize things we don't need. We subsidize profitable businesses that do not need the subsidies. Okay? You can't tell me that we couldn't subsidize Whole Foods. Like, if you go into the grocery store, in my perfect world, I know this isn't for everyone, but I would tax the hell out of processed foods like soda, candy, crackers, anything in a bag or a box. And I would take that money and then subsidize with it the Whole Foods. Okay? Make it so you can go over there and buy a potato for 5 cents. Buy an apple for 5 cents. And in fact, all fruits and vegetables just be a fucking nickel. Okay? If you just made it so that outside layer of your grocery store, that part with all the, fresh and mostly Whole Foods and everything, I think that should be the cheapest part of the store. I think the middle section should just be expensive as fuck to discourage it. Might help me, and certainly would help the rest of us here in this country. But, they don't want to do that. It's a whole systemic issue, because then if you made the Whole Foods cheaper, well, then somebody would have to cook them. And unfortunately, everyone in this country is working. Nobody is home to cook. So that becomes an issue. It's like, there's a reason why the take-home pizza is so damn popular. It's $10. You could just throw it in the oven and go, right? I mean, this is why this is happening. So if you wanted to address that, you would also have to address the, wage problem here in this country, where, wages aren't high enough to meet the cost of living, so that two parents have to constantly work, which means the kids are the ones to do the cooking, maybe, kinda, or the parents get home really late and don't have time to actually spend time cooking. It's a whole systemic issue. It's a mess, and the border's just one cog in it. And you don't even get me started on the prison industrial complex. I mean, for fuck's sake, Walmart and McDonald's hire them. Chances are the next cheeseburger you eat was made by a prisoner for nothing, because slave labor is very real in this country, no matter what they tell you. So this is all a very complicated issue. I urge everyone to really have an open mind about all ideas on this, okay? If your friend says open borders and you're like, oh my God, that's so fucking crazy. Like, okay, I get that's your initial knee-jerk reaction. It was mine the first time I heard it, right? Because you grow up in a system, you accept the system, and you actually do fight to defend it to a degree. And the first time I heard open borders, I was like, oh my God, that's fucking crazy. Same thing as abolish prisons. Oh my God, that's nuts. But for me, once that idea gets there and I think about it for a while, and maybe I hear a few other people's points of view on it, and I actually look into it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm 100% on board with the idea of open borders, but I'm not really hearing a lot of good arguments for why not. Like, the arguments against open borders are very fear-based. They're not statistical, right? That's not how it works. Okay? The first person to bring COVID into the United States did not come through the southern border. He came on a plane and was totally okay. Right? And he landed in Seattle. So, diseases don't cross. The terrorists from 9/11, the biggest terrorist attack in the country's history, they did not come through the southern border. They were here legally. They came through normal means. Okay? So, I mean, a lot of it is fear-based. It's like, oh my God. And oh my God, we'll overwhelm the welfare system and all this other stuff. It's like, dude, they don't get shit. If you're illegal, you don't get anything. So a lot of it's very fear-based. Not much of it is statistical. The statistics they usually cite are either extremely old and don't represent the current reality. But again, even the border is such a massive, massive issue. One of the things I always talk about is, if you don't want Mexicans coming here, maybe we could help Mexico being the kind of place you don't want to leave. Crazy idea, I know. Maybe we can prop up some of those countries south of our own border so that people like it there and want to stay, because your average human wants to stay where they are. We don't like moving. Moving sucks. Moving is a pain in the ass. I don't even like moving across the street. If you told me I had to switch houses with my neighbor, I'd be like, fuck you, I'm not doing it. That's a lot of work. You can't tell me moving to an entirely new country where you don't speak the language, and also, 50% of the population is highly critical and hates your guts. Like, you can't tell me that's something everyone wants to sign up to do. Nobody moves because they want to. The United States was populated by Europeans mostly who were under oppression by one mean or another. You have the Puritans who had to come here for religious persecution, but you had the Irish who had to come here because of famine. America was seen as a land of opportunity because, spoiler alert, there was none over in Europe. I mean, people came here because they had to. If people were fine and happy in Europe, they never would have come here. Their land, their world that they lived was so fucked up and horrible that they decided, I'm going to risk it all and go to the brand new place. I have no idea what's there for me. So, anyway, that's enough of this rant. Thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it that you're here. We'll talk again, hopefully tomorrow. I am recording the entire hearing, so hopefully we have some good bits. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court does not allow cameras in there. I really hate that. I think they should. But then you could see, Thomas just snoring most of the time, and that wouldn't be good. But anyway, that's what we'll talk about tomorrow, is whether or not the 14th Amendment actually applies to anyone or not. Yay! In the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Please get boosted, get vaccinated. This thing's on its way back. I just saw a thing about Omicron fucking up everybody's, new year. So definitely get ready. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good one.